bed. But if you're looking for, again, a plant that will bloom its heart out even in the driest of times, sunny areas, cannas are really, really worth growing. About the only pest that gets after these, and it can be serious, are some caterpillars. And sometimes they'll eat the leaves before they unroll, sometimes they'll eat the leaves after they're open. If you start seeing big edges eaten out of them, get out your BT worm killer and spray. Always put a little molasses in with your BT worm killer. You control the caterpillars very well and control the problem quickly. You will also see in a wet year, you may see snail and slug damage on these. I don't think you're going to see many snails or slugs this year unless the weather really changes. If you have snail or slug problems, that Sluggo, non-poisonous slug bait, snail bait will do a real good job on them. Finish up with just a couple of other things. Foliage, there are a bunch of different asparagus, ferns. They're not ferns. They're related to edible asparagus. This is the most common one. This is Asparagus springeri, usually evergreen. Great thing to plant around others. Put it in the sides of a pot, let it trail over the edge, but eventually it's going to crowd everything out and your whole pot will be asparagus. I don't know how long this has been in this pot, but let's find out. They get to the point where, you can see how they crowd things out with a root system like that. By the way, these little bulbs on here are not nematode damage. That is water storage, and that's why the plant can survive such a drought. Extremely popular is the upright form of this that people call foxtail. Another one, and actually the one I asked Patrick to bring back here, but he didn't get the right one. There's one they call Ming fern, which is a very lacy, very delicate looking one. It's not delicate, it is very, very hardy. Grows much taller, and again I was telling you how much fun it is to have a cutting garden. Grow some of your Ming fern too, because it is a wonderful foliage to cut and put in with things, and the cut fronds will last a month easily. But asparagus is really, really, really tough and hardy and should be included in many gardens. This plant is variegated ginger. You're looking for something good for the shade that has some color to it. Believe it or not, it even does bloom periodically and has a pretty flower. But variegated ginger is grown mainly for its foliage. It's going to grow about 4 feet tall. And if you're looking for something that makes a big plant and is a great backdrop for other things, variegated ginger is a great plant to grow in bright shade, even morning sun, just no hot afternoon sun. This is a plant that really surprised me. This plant is called Alstroemeria. It may have a common name. If it does, I don't know what it is. What is it?
Peruvian lily.
Peruvian lily. Very good. Thank you. This is a plant that you buy as a cut flower in the grocery store in many, many different colors. And you think, oh, way too delicate, wouldn't grow here. Wrong. This thing will really, really do well in San Antonio. A sunny area. It does like slightly improved soil. Again, work a bunch of compost in. But for your cutting garden, you have to grow some Alstroemerias. They come in a wide range of colors, and they just don't seem to have many problems at all. A few years ago, somebody asked me about Alstroemerias, and I said, oh, I think we're too hot and too dry to grow here. She said, I'm going to bring you some. So she brought me a picture of her mother's yard in Castle Hills. There are probably 1,000 spikes of flowers in a bed, half the size or the quarter the size of this building. If you love these, when you get them as cut flowers, if you love having these things, plant some of them in your perennial garden. Now they will grow in a lot more moist areas. A few years ago, saved our money and went to Ireland for a vacation. You see these growing in the wet gardens over there. So they will grow in shadier areas. They will grow in moisture soils. But Alstroemeria is actually a pretty good plant once it's established, even in drier soils. And if you love having a cutting garden, it just almost has to include some Alstroemeria.
Bob, what's the common name?
Peruvian lily?
Peruvian lily.
Okay.
And how tall do they get?
Most of the varieties here are going to get about 2 feet.
And it would take afternoon sun?
It will take afternoon sun. It'll grow in morning sun, but it'll certainly tolerate afternoon sun. One other. This is yarrow. Again, it's not real commonly grown because it has a relatively short blooming period, but I think some of its claim to fame is the deer don't really like it. There are native forms of yarrow. There's a white one they call, I can't even remember, yellow one they call moonshine, there's a gold one, there's kind of a pink one. Of the two varieties, the white and the yellow are by far the hardiest. But if you're looking for a drought-tolerant perennial, and again, nice foliage to it, I think we have some of this right outside the fence there in one of those beds. You can see what it looks like with a bunch of flowers, but yarrow is certainly worth growing. What's that?
Butterflies like it.
Yeah, butterflies do love it. They most certainly
There's a
do.
red one called paprika.
Mm-hmm.
They're pretty awesome.
Yeah. Another plant that butterflies absolutely love. I say this for last because I am reluctant to tell people it's perennial. Most years it is, but if you keep it wet through the winter months, it'll rot on you every time. Keep this thing on the dry side. And again, when pences first came out, there was one color and there was one size. Now we get things that range everywhere from 6 inches in height to 2 feet in height. And again, flowers all summer. About the only bug I ever see on this is a big tobacco hornworm, which makes a big interesting moth, but can you know, 3 of them could strip a pot this size in one day. So if you start seeing a lot of eaten foliage, you've probably got hornworms on there. You probably want to spray with BT.
What kind is that again?
It's called pentas, P-E-N-T-A-S.
Yeah, when the whiskey battle, it's probably about that big.
You've learned to grow it. And like I say, many people kill it with kindness, keeping it too wet in the winter months. So what I always tell people is plant it and expect it to be an annual, and be real surprised when it's pretty, you know, for 2 or 3 years at least. Because if you keep them, if you don't drown them, and if Mother Nature doesn't drown them, it will be perennial. Now, there are a bunch of other plants on this list. Like I said, we could go till 3 o'clock this afternoon if you wanted to. If you walk through the parking lot out here, you'll see a few others that are worth mentioning. A couple of things for the shade. If you look again up kind of toward the front underneath the trees up there, you will see some bright red salvias. That is the smoothleaf sage, which is a good bright shade to morning sun plant. Just blooms up a storm in the shade. There is tropical sage, Salvia coccinea, which is the same way. If you look outside the gate, you're going to see that dark, dark blue Salvia granitica. Last year there was a big tree shading it, and that's why it got so big. It will tolerate sun, but it's also going to be very happy in bright shade. Other things should mention, I didn't really bring any in because it doesn't have any flowers on it. Right outside this gate you will see what's called obedient plant or physostygia. Maybe when we have some later seminars we'll have a pot or two to show you. The reason it's called obedient plant is it will put up a spike with lots of flowers around it. A spike that looks very much like that, but the flowers are on a little hinge. And if you take an individual flower and bend it 90 degrees, it'll stay wherever you put it. You can arrange the flowers back and forth. They are obedient. So that's where the name obedient plant came from.
You did mention Durantas.
Duranta, that's another one we really should have included. Duranta or Brazilian skyflower, again, I think is one of the best perennials you can possibly plant. Used to be there was one upright form. Now we have some forms that are more trailing. You'll see we have some in big hanging baskets. If you look again over on that far fence, I think we cut it back this spring to keep the size down. But by fall, they'll be up about this tall. They'll have, you know, thousands of flowers on them. At one point in both the 2 previous years in the fall, some of the different little sulfur butterflies and things, you'd drive by and there'd easily be 250 butterflies on each one. Just be this cloud of butterflies come off every time you disturbed it.
Are they poisonous though to dogs? Are they toxic?
I don't know.
Yes.
Are
I
they?
read that somewhere.
Okay. I don't think the dogs would chew on them as a food source, but dogs may chew on almost anything. We're going to talk about, if we're going to talk about some things that are poisonous to dogs, one of the most dangerous things to dogs that you really need to watch out for, sago palms. The sago itself is probably not that toxic, but if you're ever dividing them, you know the little growths that come off the side, those little ball-like things, extremely poisonous. And dogs will play with them because they're ball-like, and one of them's enough to kill a dog. So be sure that you keep your puppy dogs away from those things. While we're on the subject of dogs and pets, if you know anyone who may be interested in adopting puppies or kittens, or probably adult animals as well, I told you Mother's Day, we do our big party here. The following weekend on Saturday, We're going to do an event with the Humane Society. They're going to bring and set up out here in the parking lot. We're going to call it Paws and Petals and encourage people to adopt animals, and we're going to give a pretty nice gift certificate to everybody that adopts an animal on that day. So that's, again, something to put on your calendar. Might be a day you want to stay away unless you're, don't tell one of our managers, Donna, when we talked about doing this, she said, you realize I'm going to have to adopt